here they are. The top axle is the wider axle out of the 03 through 2012 Crown Vics, and the axle on the bottom is the narrower that's out of the 98 to 02 Crown Vics. The upper one measures, I measured with the brake rotors bolted on with a straight edge on each side. The top measures 69 and 13/16, and the bottom measures 65 and 11/16, so it's 4 1/8 inches different, so you're getting just over 2 inches per side, more or less, depending on which axle you want to go with. I'll point out the few differences in them, and then I'll go over a few other things that I've learned along the way, and then probably a few things will be left in the description, because when I go to put this new axle in, the parking brake might be an issue, and I'm not sure if you can use the brake lines that come with the newer one, but I have new brake lines for the lower one. I'm swapping from the wider axle to the narrower. I'm swapping from the wider axle to the narrower axle for wheel room under the bed sides. So you could go either way. If you had an older Vic and want a wider axle in the back, you could do that. Or if you have a newer Vic and you want to run, let's say, a lower offset wheel in the back with a little more dish to it or something, you could run the narrower axle. The wideness on the cars would basically be affected by the inner frame rails, and if you put fender flares on it, if you push it out. So now I will go over, let's do the, I guess we'll do the shock mounts first. All right, so starting from the inside and working out, the sway bar mounts are the same, the spring locators are the same, and the bump stops are the same. Once you get to the shocks on the newer, wider axle, the shock has a mount on the back that runs up to the outside of the frame rail, which would be up in this area. On the older, narrower axle, the shock mounts are on the front, right under the spring locator. And I'm told on crossover year, like frames, like I think it was 04, 03, 04, the holes might be in your frame to mount those shocks. If not, a lot of people just drill the hole. It's the same style of shock. It's an eyelet on the bottom and it's a stud on the top. So switching either one, I guess if you switched from the narrow to the wider, you could either make provisions to continue to use a shock out front here. If not, you're going to have to make up on the outside of the frame rail, which would be in this area here. You'd have to make a mount to catch the top stud of that. The brakes. On the newer, wider axle, you're going from vented discs to solid discs on the older, narrower axle. And a funny thing when I ordered parts for this is if you look at the calipers, there's a left and a right. You can see the caliper is mounted towards the front of the vehicle on both of these, but when you go to the older axle, one caliper's on the front, one caliper's on the rear. And I noticed that when I went to order these, that there was no left and right, and I was curious about that, so I looked it up, and I guess Ford saved a few bucks by not having to do the machine work to put the bleeder on top, because there is a provision on both sides of the bleeder, but yeah, for some reason they didn't do that. And some people have talked on forums about trying to swap these brakes onto this one, but I mean, I'm not super worried about it. Mine is mounted in an F100. I don't have a Crown Vic. Technically the chassis and everything underneath is a Crown Vic, but it's in a 71 F100. So disc brakes on the rear is a benefit either way, whether it's vented or solid. And that's pretty much it. There was always, every time you'd ask the width of the axles and stuff, there'd be different answers and everything, so I figured I'd just make this video. So on the newer, wider axle, like I went over in the beginning, 69 13/16. On the older, narrower, 65 11/16, which is just about over 2 inches per side. Like I said, you're going to either lose or gain depending on which way you're going with this swap. But if there's anything in the future, I'll put in the description all the specs on this as far as what the widths, and I guess I could put shock numbers in there, but that's literally just whatever axle you have, you would order the shocks for that year car. It's that easy with the shocks, unless you're doing something one-off or making a custom mount for shocks. I was thinking about, when I mount the narrower one in, I could make brackets and put them on the back, but the other thing you can see is if you see where the shock mount hole is, the lower control arm mount hole is on this one, it comes down and then there's your provision for your shock. On this one, it doesn't come down, and the problem on this is you have a caliper, because when Ford did this weird caliper thing where they mounted one on the front, one on the back one would most definitely be in the way of a shock. I mean, you might be able to bring something in here, but then I think you're getting in too close to where the frame rail would be, and yeah, I don't know. Definitely doable on this side, but yeah. Oh, the other thing is parking brake. I was told, or read online, that the parking brake will work for both of these either way, but the issue is on the newer axle, there's your parking brake pull cable right there, and if you've been under yours and looked at the way it works, this is the newer, wider axle. They both pull into the center to work the parking brake, but then when you go down to this one, it has a boss for the parking brake, and then it has like a hook lever back here that pulls back. So I'm not too worried about the parking brake right now because it's an automatic, and I just put it in park and leave it, and don't really park it on any hills or anything crazy like that. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, if you've put one of these in or done this and you've figured out the parking brake, you can definitely leave in the comments what you've done or what you figured out. Mine's probably going to be just get it in and then kind of figure it out afterwards. If it's you need a full parking brake cable from either year, then you might do that. But my thing is, this lower, narrower axle is going in temporarily to get the wheels on the truck and get it going, and then once I get this pulled apart, rebuilt, then I am probably just going to clearance the fenders to get the wheels to fit instead of tucking them under the bed. But yeah, I think that's it. All right, so the axle's in. New control arms are on. They're poly up front and sphericals in the back on both. All right, so the brake line issue. I made this bracket. This piece right here is an Earl's fitting adapter that goes from the bubble flare to a 3N. And this bracket I had made, it's all stainless steel. You can see a little bit here. I had them laser cut and it was a hair off, but this will be fine for mine. If I make any more, I have the adjustments I need to make so that it will bolt up just like a factory one. But this will work for now. And yeah, all the things I read on the internet about using the older brake lines. The older brake lines are not going to work. First of all, they weren't long enough when this axle is fully at droop, the way it sits, and these are, I can't remember, 17 or 19 inch lines, and they're still a little, this is full droop, and that's with the the front mounted shocks. They're there and there. I was going to try to use the brake lines, my stock brake lines that came on this truck, but once you got the fittings just weren't going to happen, not going to work. So this is the easiest thing I found. I believe the brake lines were 20 bucks a piece. The fittings were $15, and then to get the tabs and everything cut. So it's under 100 bucks, but everything fits now and everything should be fine. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, the axle's in. I just bled the brakes, and I'm about to just set the truck back down on the ground and take it for a ride. But yeah, that was just to give an update if you're going to do this. Getting these Earl's fittings and then just using stainless braided lines you can get from Summit is probably the fastest and easiest way to get this done. So if you're planning on doing this, you probably will order everything ahead of time so that you'll have it. I'll put some part numbers for these pieces in the description, so that way anyone who needs to do it. These are just the OE replacement shocks. So if you're using something that is a little shorter or a little longer, you might need to just double check your brake line length to make them work. But that's it. And I have no information on the parking brake, because this parking brake setup on these two, I don't know if you can get this to work with the parking brake from the newer model cars. This might be a situation where you use the old parking brake cable and run it all the way up to the pedal up front and replace the whole line. And I'm not doing that just yet because it's not like a dire necessity I need to do so. Maybe that'll be in an update video in the future sometime. So this is a 17 by 10 plus 18 with a 1/4 inch spacer, and it still fits under the bed sides, and you still have a little wiggle room up there. I could probably push out a hair more, but like I said, once the other axle gets put back in and I get the new fenders that are going to go on this thing, then that'll all be taken care of. But for now, I got a lot. I can't even drive it up front. It's too, I can't turn. Same thing up front, 1710s plus 18 with no spacers up front. But then I don't have any room on the I don't have any room on the fenders. And also my cab mounts in the back are basically shot to shit. That's why the body line you can see from here really doesn't line up that great, but that's it.